I have one question that we'll start our discussion with. So many of you have used metaphors from the natural world to understand your own difficult, sometimes difficult human experience. And so I just wanted to see, how do you see eco-literature as a way of maybe creating connections with others who might not have that same experience, or with others who are within that same realm? And this connects to kind of a larger question, which is, right now it's so challenging to advocate for the environment in a variety of ways. So many different sides, however you want to perspective. But how would eco-literature cross philosophical boundaries, perhaps through the natural metaphors you've used, to understand your own difficult human experiences? So that's that question. It's a lot. And Pam, I wonder if we might start with you. If you just finished reading, and we'll just start off with you, and then we'll go perhaps to Paisley and then to David.
You know, I have to say, I actually think this is a good time. Like, I don't think it's a hard time. I think, you know, especially in the West, we are now beyond the moment where anybody can deny climate change, except for, you know, the most insane people. You know, we're sort of beyond the point where, you know, this is the red alert and it's happening. You know, I mean, COVID is just one part of it. You know, we're all breathing smoke today, no matter where we are. Maybe not you, David, but the rest of us are breathing smoke today, even though the fires are, you know, almost 1,000 miles away. You know, it feels like, you know, somewhere I switched over from, you know, being so sad and angry that all of these things were happening, to thinking, okay, well, I guess it's true. You know, things had to get this bad before people would take action. And I do believe people are going to take action. I do believe that. I believe, you know, I don't know when or how soon or how much it'll save or if there's any hope. I don't have answers to any of that. But I do believe there are many, many people, especially young people, who are working very hard to make the change that is so long past time it has to be made. How eco-poetry and eco-nonfiction and eco-literature play a role in that, you know, is the same role it's always played, I think. You know, I have always written, I always find my inspiration to write in the natural world. And, you know, our small part of this movement to try to save what we love and what heal, you know, for me personally, the natural world healed me, it mothered me. I'm not here without it. So I'm trying to tell stories about it to try to make it vivid and specific and evocative and full of, you know, the rich sensory detail it contains. I'm trying to translate that into language so that people see and feel and hear and taste the beauty of it, the importance of it, the wonder of it. You know, I think those of us who teach, I mean, I went from, you know, maybe 20 years ago, I would ask my students how many of them, you know, slept on the ground, how many of them went hiking, how many of them spent time outside, and there would always be like 10 or half. And now it's like 1 or 2. And that's a fact of how we're living now. And so language is one way to bring that experience and that importance and that beauty to people who don't understand it or haven't been raised with it. Though those people, you know, want to breathe, you know, and they want, you know, they want to be able to drink clean water, and they want, you know, like it feels to me like everything has merged, you know, just basic survival on a level of breathing and drinking and, you know, has merged sort of with the environmental movement. Those of us who've been walking around forever saying we need wilderness to make us feel good, to make us feel happy and alive. Now we're all one, you know, or we're not going to be able to like do the very simple thing of breathing. And if 2020 has been about anything, it's been about breathing, you know, in so many ways.
So I guess me next. Well, I have two things to say about it. One is, and I think it kind of goes off of what Pam was saying. I think we have this idea, or we've previously had this idea, that nature was something that you went to for respite. It was something out there. And it's always been something here. We've always been in nature. We've never been somehow weirdly outside of nature. Like that was never happening. And that's why I started with the poem about that tree across my house, which is that at some point your cycle is attached to some other natural object, another being out there in the world. And I think a lot of us feel that way. And like I was saying before, I mean, with a hurricane that just came through, I can't actually, this hurricane force winds that came through and ripped up these, you know, really old trees, and people are walking around standing in kind of grief around these enormous trees, and they're everywhere. And there's no, I mean, it looks like our city was at war. And, you know, I saw people crying in the park, you know, people you would not necessarily imagine having these kinds of reaction. I found myself crying in the park looking at these trees and actually recognizing the tree that had fallen. It wasn't just sort of like a random thing. I think we discount a great deal in ourselves when we think that somehow we're not already connected to or moved by the natural. And I agree with Pam. I think we're in an ideal moment because climate change, I mean, an ideal horrifying moment, right? We're in a place where we cannot possibly deny that this is happening, and we cannot possibly deny our interconnectedness in really powerful ways. And as a poet, I mean, I work in metaphor. I mean, this is the thing we do. And I don't think that that's something that only poets do. I think it would be the rare human that doesn't look at a thing and immediately attach another kind of narrative to it and have a kind of, you know, other kind of encounter with it. And, you know, the fact is metaphors are used all the time. They're used constantly around us. And there's no one that uses a metaphor more powerfully than a politician. And I think having lived through a year of the White House saying Chinese virus when half of your family is Chinese, that has effects when, you know, friends and family go to the grocery store and are spat on or are glared at or treated badly. Or I get hate mail for writing an op-ed about how this metaphor is damaging. We get metaphor, we get it powerfully. We use it all the time. And so to a certain extent, what I feel poetry does in this moment, and eco-literature does, is remind us of the ways in which we deploy metaphors, because metaphors are not innocent just because they're supposedly creative. It depends on who's creating it and in what kind of context they're using it. So that's all I'd say.
I'll jump in. The River Always Wins was written to be a metaphor for open progress. So the metaphor is very much central to my work. I also want to point out that all the world's great spiritual traditions, all the creation myths, the creation stories, are all metaphors that have to do with nature. That's how our ancestors understood the world. That's how they understood what was greater than themselves. In many ways, we still do. And I think that we're in a point in time right now where the arts community, the writers, activists have a really important role to play. We have asked artists around the world to join with us in creating art using the metaphor of water and nature as a way to create hope and progress and to create change. We find that dance companies are approaching us and saying they want to create choreography based on the themes of The River Always Wins, musicians, actors, and others who want to be a part of taking this metaphor and expanding it, and visual artists. So we are embracing that. And I think this is a critical time for us to do that as writers, and as artists and as change agents. I do a lot of work in politics and as an activist, and I think that we are at a critical moment where we can take metaphors that people understand, put them into action, turn them into policy. Because when you turn things into policy, and then you can measure that and monitor that and administer that over a long period of time, you're able to start with art and the natural world and end up creating really true, long-lasting positive change. And we're doing that whether through the Dallas Water Gardens that I'm building now, the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve that I founded. We raised over $300 million last year for the Dallas Parks Department. We have rewritten the laws of the city of Dallas for 15 years now to make Dallas a greener city. And we've done it in a city that's very business oriented, but we've done it by getting people closer to nature. And when we do that, we create votes, and by creating votes, we create power. So I'm very much involved in that. And I thank Pam and Paisley for being involved in that also, and for the opportunity to be a part of this today. But this is a great moment for us to take what we do as writers and artists and turn that into lasting positive social change.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's get one more question in there. We just got one that I think fits in really with this conversation. While we're talking about these metaphorical aspects of ecolit, I'd like to ask whether our writers think first about nature and then consider it how it relates to humanity, or whether they think first of humanity and then search for things in the natural world that can portray those ideas. And why don't we start with Paisley on this one?
That's a fantastic question. I think, and I can only speak obviously for my experience, but I find that if I go to a thing with the message, and then I write about the thing with that message in mind, I basically have created didactic literature. I haven't actually had some sort of organic relationship to it. And I find that oftentimes the metaphors that are the most powerful, the ones that are most complex, and by complex, I mean that allow for kind of ambiguity and a space for the reader to engage with the ideas, argue or imagine or reinterpret or use that language that I produced and think about their own lives. The kind of complexity that interests me is usually when I stumble across something in the natural world. And the reality is that when you look at an object or an animal or anything, your gaze is you. There's no separation, even if you're not necessarily writing about you. So there's no way of kind of getting rid of the human. Writing about the natural world is writing about the human. So at that level, they're always sort of deeply connected. And I guess I'll stop there. Does anyone else want to take that one?
Pam, you want to jump in?
Sure. I mean, I guess I would just say something that I know we all believe, but just for the sake of saying it out loud, like we are nature, you know, we are nature, and we can pretend we're not, or we can deny the animal part of ourselves, but we are it. For me, in terms of process, and again, this is just me. I mean, I would agree with Paisley. My process is to, you know, move through the natural world or the man-made world, and you know, which could be argued is also part of the natural world, and pay really strict attention and wait for something to arrest my attention, you know, for something to say, hey, writer over here, pay attention to this. And I know that's mine. I know that's my metaphor to use. And really the less I know about how I'm using it, or the less I know what piece of my interior landscape it corresponds to, the better, because I will have less chance of over-determining its meaning when I get it to the page and, you know, kind of forcing it to mean in some way. Ideally, I won't really know what that correspondence is, maybe even all the way through revision. Sometimes it'll occur to me in revision. Sometimes a reviewer will say, oh, this meant this. And I'll go, oh, I guess maybe so, but also maybe not, you know. And then, you know, there are sometimes when it works the other way, when I'll have been given an assignment, and the assignment is to write about women and ambition. And so then I'll, you know, kind of look through, I call these little things glimmers. I'll look through my glimmers that I have found in the natural world and see if there's any of those that feel like they might be about women and ambition, you know. But my first job is a collector of these things. I think of myself as kind of a collagist, really. And I'm collecting these physical sensory details from the natural world, and, you know, and bringing them turning them into language and then waiting to use them somehow. So mostly it goes, I pay attention in the natural world, and then how that refers to me reveals itself or doesn't eventually.
I try to spend time in nature observing, just noticing a great deal. For example, the light changes every single day because of the position in the earth and the sun related to each other. So when I take that time to observe, to notice how the light is different every single morning, it gets me closer to nature. And by my being closer to nature, I think then I have the opportunity through my writing or my performing to bring other people close to it. I don't see us as separate from. I think that when we separate ourselves from, we put ourselves in danger and in harm's way. So one of the things we try to do is bring people closer to nature and to get them to do that type of observation also. That's why I wrote in the book about what the Zen master says, and the Zen master actually said that to me. The essence of Zen is 3 words: catch your breath. Notice that breath, notice that moment, be alive in that moment. And if you are that, then you're aware of where you are in your circumstances. So if you're in nature, you're observing, you're paying attention, then things come to you that they might not otherwise if you're not there and observing. So once we have done that, then we can become a conduit to lead other people to that through our writing and through our art. I think of us as an invasive 2-legged species, and with a constant desire to redeem. I think as artists, sometimes we have to choose between whether we simply reflect the world back to itself or we try to change it and redeem it. And I think that the world needs a lot of redemption these days. So first observe and notice and catch your breath, and then find ways for that to be translated into work that can touch other people and bring them closer to nature, and immerse them in that in your work as much as you can.